Hello everyone. The game that I am about to show you is one of such brilliance and precision that it's gonna affect you. For weeks, months, maybe even years, you are going to be thinking about this game and wondering, how is such elegance and perfection even possible on the chessboard? This could very well be the game of the decade, my friends, and it's a game that no human being could ever hope to play. And yes, it was played by computer engines, but before you click away from this video to go find yourself another game by Magnus Carlsen, you need to ask yourself, why? Why would I want to go look at a game that is just full of silly, blunderous nonsense, as all human games are, when compared to the game that I have for you here? This game truly is flawless chess art. But enough with my little sales pitch, let's just let the moves speak for themselves, and I promise you will not be disappointed. Stockfish 16, playing white here against the formidable Komodo version 14, opens the game with e4. We have a Sicilian defense, and both computer programs using an opening book here up until move 10. This is a 5-minute blitz game, and you might be asking, why 5 minutes? Why not give the programs more time to think, get some better quality chess? Well, this seems to be the sweet spot. If you give the programs too much time to think, you end up getting a lot of draws or technical endgame wins with a lot of moves. You don't get these brilliant sacrificial wins in the middle game like we're going to see here. So, still all opening theory. We get to this moment here where we have this interesting knight to f6 check. This is a known position. You can't take the knight, of course, or else the pawn takes with check, and then you grab the bishop. So we don't go down that road. We have king to f8, knight to e4 now. Both programs now out of book. The black king can no longer castle, but the position's about equal. h6 from Komodo decides to clear that square to castle by hand. He's going to put his king over there. h3 from Stockfish wants to keep a bishop off g4 apparently. And now king to g8. Here goes the king over to a safer square. d3, king to h7, a4, looking for a5. Komodo puts a stop to that by playing a5 itself. Now bishop to f4. Now we have a bit of an odd move from Komodo, queen to d7, blocking the light squared bishop. So apparently it's planning on developing that bishop to b7 or a6 at this point. Stockfish didn't really like this move. It thought that knight e6 was better, which is probably why it played bishop to g3 at this point, just anticipating that. Rook to f8 from Komodo, presumably to push that f-pawn at some point. Queen d2, some normal development. Here comes knight e6 now. Rook goes to the center. Knight d4, hopping into that central square. Now we have knight to h2 from Stockfish. Now where's that knight going? Well, he's actually planning on redeploying it to the e3 square. Now we have queen d5, opening the diagonal for the bishop. It seems that if he ever had the plan of bishop to b7 or a6, he's abandoned it because the bishop, after knight to f1, goes to e6. And Stockfish immediately doesn't like this move, and it thinks the game is tipping in white's favor. What Stockfish thinks black should have played, and I don't know why Komodo didn't, was bishop takes h3, grabbing a free pawn. You can't take the bishop or the f3 square loses defense, and there's a nasty fork with the knight. So, Stockfish here thinks that knight e3 is the best move for white, and still thinks that white has a healthy advantage despite losing the pawn. It's got compensation. It's attacking the queen. Okay, we didn't go down that road. Komodo played the inferior, apparently, bishop to e6, at least according to Stockfish, who now plays c3, giving that knight a kick. And at this point, there's another move I don't really understand. I would play knight f5 here, hitting the bishop. That's a pretty active square. But Komodo decided to go for knight to b3. Okay, it does come with tempo on the queen, but after queen to f4, this knight isn't doing much over here, and its prospects don't get much better for the rest of the game, as you'll see. Queen to d7 now from Komodo, clearing the d5 square. It's decided to put its bishop there. Knight to e3. The knight has completed its journey for now, eyeing some nice squares. Rook a to e8. And now a strange move from Stockfish, which I can't say that I really see the purpose of. Bishop to h2. What is it doing? I don't know. But who am I, a mere mortal, to question the mind of the machine, right? Stockfish must have its reasons. Now we have bishop to d5 from Komodo. Stockfish does not like that move and thinks it's totally winning now. It thought that black needed to play b5 for whatever reason. Now queen to h4. Pinning the h-pawn. Looks like we could have a knight to g5 check on the cards at some point. f6 from Komodo. E takes f6, e takes f6. Bishop to d6 from Stockfish. A little probing of the rook. It moves to f7. And now what would you play here as white? Would you put your bishop on f4 like Stockfish did and walk right into a fork? Well, if you did and your opponent played g5, you should be very thankful because then you'd have bishop takes g5, f takes g5, and there's our knight g5 check. Can't be taken, that pawn's pinned, and it's a fork. We're going to pick up the rook on the next move, and white actually comes out ahead in material here, getting the 2 pawns and the rook for the sacrificed bishop. So, Komodo did not play that. It took the knight out instead with the bishop. D takes e4. Now there's an attack on the queen, so the queen goes to e7. And now surely Stockfish needs to prevent that fork, right? Absolutely not. Stockfish plays a move here that I'll wager not many of you will find. Are you ready for it? Rook to d6. How does this work? Well, we better start by looking at the obvious, g5 again. Here, white will play queen to h5. And if you take the bishop, knight to f5 hits the queen and defends the rook. Okay, let's say the queen goes to f8. And now white just simply plays rook e to d1. And look at the domination here. Black is up a piece, but look at the pieces it has. This bishop here, horrible. This knight doing nothing over here. So even though black is up a piece, he's effectively down in material because his pieces are so inactive. And all white's pieces are poised to attack. So that's not what we saw in the game. Instead, Komodo played f5 and offering a queen trade, which Stockfish rejects. It wants to keep the queens on the board. It wants to attack. Queen to g3 now. And here Komodo finally takes the bait with g5. It's no longer a fork, but this bishop is trapped. And what do you do now as white? Looks like black is finally winning, right? Well, as incredible as it seems, Komodo is actually the one who is hopelessly lost after Stockfish plays this crazy looking e takes f5, which happens to be the only winning move. What on earth does this accomplish? Well, one more time, we're going to need to look at the obvious move, g takes f4, which runs into queen to g6 check. King goes to h8. And at this point, white would love to play knight to g4, get the knight into the action with some nasty threats here. But that would drop a rook with check. You can't do that. So instead, there's rook to e6. And now we see the whole point of having the pawn on f5. The queen has to move queen to d7, and now we get in our knight to g4. We're threatening things like f6. It's all very nasty. And this is a line that I really don't have time to fully explore, but we will just have to look at the position and trust the almighty Stockfish when it tells us that black is completely finished here. But getting back to the game, instead of g takes f4, queen to f8, played by Komodo, and Stockfish's bishop is still trapped. But here, Stockfish finds another insane move, a move which just looks terrible at first glance. I mean, I would expect something like bishop takes g5, and that's actually winning for white. But Stockfish plays rook to e6, allowing a simplification. Rook takes e6, f takes e6, rook takes f4. Pieces are coming off the board. White only has a pawn for being a piece down. He's got a passed pawn, but that doesn't look very dangerous at the moment. Looks like black should be able to stop it. How the hell is white going to win this? What would you play here? There is only one crushing move for white in this position. See if you can spot it. Take a minute, look at the position. Can you play like a chess god, even if for only one move? Can you come up with the move that Stockfish played here? The unbelievable winning sequence played by Stockfish begins with knight to f5, which is one of the most incredible moves I've ever seen. It supports the advance of the passed pawn, but that knight can be taken 2 different ways, but both fail. First, let's look at the move that wasn't played in the game. Rook takes f5. You push the pawn, the queen can block, but now you got queen to d3, pinning that rook to the king. You can defend with the king, but now g4 will win the rook. Black can try to pick up the passed pawn with bishop to f6. We take the rook with check. You can't move the king to f7 to help round up that pawn because this would run into queen c4 check, picking up the knight. So you have to go to g7, let's say, and now queen to d6. Defending the pawn and preparing rook to e6, which is going to either win this bishop here or it's going to support the f-pawn moving if that bishop is able to move. Black is completely toast here. This knight is doing nothing to help. So that variation spectacularly fails. Before we look at the other capture back here, let's look at queen to e8 real quick, just trying to get in front of the pawn because this leads to a beautiful move, knight to d6. Again, we didn't see this line in the game, but this may be one of the most beautiful lines. Queen to e7, okay, but now we got knight to c8. Hitting the queen again, you keep trying to stay in front of that pawn, but at this point, with the knight on c8, there's queen d3 check, king moves, and then we push the pawn. We have the threat of coming in here with the queen, and black doesn't have a good defense. If you try to control that square further with bishop to f6, here we go knight d6, driving the queen away from the promotion square, and it's all over. So now let's finally look at what was played in the game. By Komodo, queen takes f5. Stockfish replies e7. Gonna queen that pawn. But wait a minute, there's rook e4. How are you dealing with this? Are you gonna queen the pawn and allow black to sack his rook like so, ending up with 2 minor pieces for the rook in the endgame? No, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna take on e4. This is what Stockfish plays. Queen takes e4 and now queen to e3. Oh, how sad. Defending the pawn through the black queen, and that pawn's gonna promote. If you were to take the queen like so, this bishop is powerless to stop the pawn, and so is the knight, and so is the king. So what's tried instead is queen to b1 check. Stockfish moves his king to h2. And now a final desperate attempt by Komodo to set a little trap, starting with the move bishop to e5 check. Looks kind of nonsensical, right? Just dropping the bishop for no reason. Well, there is a reason to it. Now that the queen's off at e3, d2 is available for that knight to move to without being captured, and this sets a little trap. If white were to just promote that pawn immediately, you get 2 queens, but you run into a perpetual check, starting with knight to f1 check. King has to move to the back rank, and now you want to play knight e3, discovered check by the queen. Important to put the knight on e3 so the queen cannot block. So Stockfish isn't going to fall for that. Of course, it plays h4, gives the king a square here. Now we have g4 from Komodo, taking that square away from the king. But here Stockfish finds a beautiful simplification. Queen to h8 check. You got to take that queen or else this pawn's going to promote with check if you go to g6. So after king takes h8, there's the queening of the pawn with check. And after king g7, you might be thinking, wait a minute, how does white win here? He's still a piece down. But we have queen to d7, check, hitting the knight, king moves, it's picked up on the next move. So here the material has equalized, but Stockfish has foreseen that this position is hopeless for Komodo due to the weakness of his king, which has no cover, and the activity of the white queen, which is eyeing the h6 pawn for the moment. Komodo defends with h5, but here we see a series of queen checks, starting with queen to f4 check. King moves, and now we go to c7, picking up this b6 pawn here. Defending b2, that's very nice, hitting all these terribly weak pawns now. And so what ends up happening is white just has too many opportunities to check. So we see a lot of that, and we see some shuffling of the pieces. But at the end of the day, Stockfish is patient. It's up a pawn. Black's pawns are horribly weak. And when the time is right, it's able to pick up more pawns after getting this pass pawn here on f3. We have queen takes c5 right here. And here we have 5 pawns versus 3, so it's just a matter of technique now. So I'm not going to comment too much on the rest of this game. I'll go ahead and show you the moves. But a 2-pawn advantage with queens and kings, that's pretty easy to win even for a human. You can see here that what ends up happening is Stockfish has the 2 extra pawns over here on the king side. And it's at this point that Komodo resigns. So I thank you for bearing witness to this brutal and blindingly accurate surgical destruction of a powerful chess engine by perhaps the most powerful chess entity to ever exist, the great Stockfish. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time.